Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Endeavour watching the stars stretch into lines as they jumped to faster-than-light speed. This was humanity's first trip beyond the outer edge of known space. Earth had sent them to explore new worlds and see what lay in the dark regions where no human had ever gone before. Lisa Rodriguez worked at her engineering station, making sure all systems ran smooth. She had built most of the ship's new engines herself and knew every bolt and wire. Ben Carter sat at weapons control, even though they hoped never to need guns out here. Dr. Amy Walsh studied star charts at the science station, looking for planets that might hold life. "Jump complete, Captain," Lisa called out as the stars returned to normal points of light. "All systems good?" Jake looked at the main screen. Space. It looked empty here, but their sensors picked up something strange. A massive energy reading came from somewhere nearby, but they could not see its source. "Amy, what do you make of this?" Jake asked, pointing at the energy readings. Dr. Walsh frowned at her instruments. "I have never seen anything like it, Captain. The energy output is huge, but there is nothing visible on our screens." "Could it be a star?" Ben asked. "No," Amy shook her head. "Stars give off different energy patterns. This is something else. Something artificial." Jake felt his heart beat faster. First contact with alien life had always been possible, but now it might be real. "Take us closer, Lisa, but keep us ready to run if we need to." The Endeavour moved forward slowly. As they got closer, the energy readings grew stronger. Then something appeared on their screens that made everyone stop breathing. A massive crystal structure hung in space, larger than any city on Earth. It glowed with inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The crystal had been carved into the shape of a throne with a seat big enough for a giant. Around it, smaller crystals floated in perfect circles. "My God," Amy whispered. "It is beautiful." Before anyone could respond, beams of light shot out from the crystal throne. The beams wrapped around the Endeavour like chains made of energy. The ship stopped moving no matter how hard Lisa pushed the engines. "Captain," Ben called out, "weapons are not responding." "Something is blocking all our systems." The crystal throne began to move toward them, or maybe it was pulling them closer. Jake could not tell which. As they got nearer, he saw figures moving inside the crystal. They looked like people made of light and shadow, wearing robes that flowed like water. "Attention, primitive vessel," a voice spoke directly into their minds without using their radios. "You have violated sacred law by traveling in space without permission from the divine order. Prepare to be judged." The Endeavour was pulled inside a docking bay that formed in the crystal as they watched. The bay sealed behind them, trapping them inside. Jake looked at his crew, knowing their first contact with aliens was not going as anyone had hoped. Guards that looked like walking light came aboard their ship. They did not speak, but somehow made it clear the humans should follow them. Jake led his crew through corridors that seemed to be made of living crystal. The walls pulsed with energy and showed images of space battles and destroyed worlds. They were brought to a large chamber where a being sat on a smaller version of the Great Throne. It had the shape of a tall, thin human, but was made of shifting energy patterns. Robes of pure light flowed around it, and its face changed like smoke and wind. "I am High Arbiter Zixtala of the Veilter," the being said. "You are the first of your species we have encountered. Tell me how primitive creatures like you gain the ability to travel between stars." Jake stepped forward, trying to look brave even though his hands shook. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. We built our ships with our own hands and minds. We did not know we needed permission to explore space." The High Arbiter made a sound like wind through broken glass that might have been laughter. "All species must receive blessing from the Ascended Ones before they may leave their birth worlds. This has been law for millions of years. Your ignorance does not excuse your crime." "What crime?" Amy asked, stepping beside Jake. "We have hurt no one. We only wanted to explore and learn." "Existence without permission is crime enough," Zixtala replied. "The galaxy belongs to those who have earned the right to rule it. We are the Ascended Ones who have risen above the flesh and become as gods. Lesser beings must know their place." The chamber filled with more light beings. Jake realized they were Being surrounded. Ben moved his hand toward his weapon, but Jake caught his arm and shook his head. Fighting would only make things worse. Your species will be judged, the High Arbiter announced. If you are found wanting, your world will be cleansed of life. This is the mercy we show to those who break our laws. Jake felt his blood turn cold. They had come looking for new worlds and instead found beings who saw themselves as gods. Now, Earth itself was in danger because of their simple desire to explore the stars. The crystal cells were worse than any prison Jake had ever imagined. The walls absorbed sound and blocked their thoughts, making everything feel distant and foggy. Lisa sat in the corner trying to take apart her communicator, but the crystal seemed to drain power from everything they touched. This is not normal crystal, she muttered. It is alive somehow. It learns how our tools work and then stops them. Ben paced the small space like a caged animal. We need to get word back to Earth. They have no idea what is coming. Dr. Walsh pressed her hands against the walls, studying their construction. The molecular structure is impossible. It exists in multiple dimensions at once. No wonder it can do things that seem like magic days past with no word from their captors. Food appeared through slots in the walls, but it tasted like nothing, and left them always hungry. The crystal prison made them weak and slow. Jake worried they were being prepared for something terrible. Then one night Amy heard voices from the cell next to theirs. She pressed her ear to the wall and listened carefully. The words were in a language she did not know, but somehow she began to understand them. There are others here, she whispered to Jake. Prisoners from different species. They have been here. For a long time, through the walls, Amy made contact with a being who called himself Warrior Singer Thek. He had been captured 3,000 years ago when his people the Kethmori tried to fight against the Ascended Ones. His voice was weak but filled with ancient rage. Your species is young, Thek told her through the crystal. You do not understand what you face. The beings you call gods have ruled this galaxy since before your son was born. They have destroyed 1,000 civilizations that dared to challenge them. Amy translated for the others. Jake leaned close to the wall. How are they so powerful? What makes them gods? Thek was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. The Nexus cores, ancient artifacts from the first civilization to die in this galaxy. The cores give them power over space and time itself. With them, they can move worlds and stop stars from burning, but they are just technology. Lisa said, all technology can be broken or defeated. Many have tried. Another voice joined them. This one belonged to Navigator Prime Seth of the Coil Masters. My people were masters of space travel for 10 million years. We thought ourselves beyond the reach of any power. The gods crushed our empire in a single day. More voices joined the conversation through the crystal walls. Silent Step through stars of the void touch spoke of how her ghost-like people had tried to hide in dimensions the gods could not see. They were found and captured anyway. Each species had been certain they could win. All had failed. So we just give up? Ben asked angrily. We let them kill everyone on Earth because no one has ever beaten them before. Hope is poison, Seth hissed. It keeps you alive to suffer longer. Better to accept death and find peace, but Jake refused to accept defeat. Through Amy he learned everything the prisoners knew about their captors. The Ascended Ones were 5 different species that had joined together long ago. The Veiltor, like Zixtela, were beings of pure energy. The Shard High were living crystals that thought in mathematics. The Grove Mines were ancient plants that dreamed in centuries. The Flux Eternal changed their shape like water. The Hive Speakers were insects that shared one vast mind. While they talked, a great council was meeting on the central throne world called Eternal Radiance. The 5 ruling species were deciding what to do with humanity. Each had their own ideas about the proper punishment for breaking sacred law. Meanwhile on Earth, Admiral Kate Thompson received a weak signal from deep space. The message was broken and hard to understand, but the words that came through made her blood freeze. Enemy coming. Earth in danger. Gods want to kill everyone. Kate called together every ship captain and scientist on Earth. Dr. Ryan, Mitchell studied the energy readings Jake had managed to send along with his warning. The physicist worked day and night trying to understand what they faced. The energy signatures are unlike anything we have ever seen, Ryan told the emergency council. But there are patterns here. Mathematical relationships that suggest these nexus cores might have weaknesses. What kind of weaknesses? Kate asked. Ryan showed them his calculations. Human brains work differently than most other species. We evolved on a world with unique magnetic fields that shaped how our neurons fire. Our thought patterns might be able to disrupt the quantum bonds that hold these cores together. It was a desperate theory based on incomplete data, but it was the only hope they had. Kate began gathering every ship Earth could fly. 30 vessels against beings who ruled a galaxy. The odds were hopeless, but humans had faced hopeless odds before. Back in their crystal prison, Jake felt the walls begin to vibrate. Something was happening. Through their alien friends, they learned the council had reached a decision. Humanity would be given a chance to prove their worth through trials. What kind of trials? Jake asked. Dek's laugh was bitter. The kind designed to show how inferior you are. Tests of technology and strength and mind against species that have had millions of years to grow perfect. When you fail, they will say, they gave you a fair chance before they killed your world. But Amy had been thinking about what Dr. Mitchell might have discovered. What if failing the trials is not the point? What if the real test is how we handle defeat? What do you mean? Lisa asked. Amy looked at her friends. Every species here tried to beat the gods at their own game. But humans are not good at playing by other people's rules. We are good at changing the game completely. The crystal walls pulsed brighter. Guards were coming. Jake stood up, feeling strength return to his body for the first time in days. Whatever was about to happen, he would face it as a human. That might not be much compared to gods, but it would have to be enough. Admiral Kate Thompson stood in the war room on Earth, watching her staff work frantically to prepare for the impossible. Jake Morrison's message had given them some warning, but not nearly enough time. Earth's entire space fleet consisted of 30 ships built for exploration, not war. Against beings who called themselves gods, they might as well throw rocks. Dr. Ryan Mitchell had not slept in 3 days. His team of physicists and engineers studied every piece of data from the Endeavour, trying to find some weakness in their enemy. The energy readings from the Crystal Throne showed patterns that looked almost familiar. There's something strange about these nexus cores, Ryan told Kate during one of their emergency meetings. The quantum signatures suggest they are not just power sources. They are doing something else. Something that requires constant energy input to maintain. What kind of something? Kate asked. Ryan rubbed his tired eyes. I think they might be prisons. Containers holding compressed matter or energy. If I am right, then disrupting them might release whatever is trapped inside. It was just a theory, but it gave them a target. Ryan began designing weapons that could interfere with quantum bonds. The missiles would need to hit the cores directly, and the timing would have to be perfect. Even then, they might only destroy 1 or 2 cores before the gods struck back. Meanwhile, in space, Jake and his crew were moved from their crystal prison to a transport ship heading for the trial grounds. The vessel was beautiful and terrible, with walls that showed the history of the galaxy. Jake watched images of mighty civilizations rising and falling while the ascended ones remained eternal. The other prisoners were moved with them. Jake finally met warrior singer Thek face to face. The alien looked like a cross between a lion and an eagle with golden fur and sharp eyes. His people had been proud hunters before their defeat. Now only a few hundred remained alive as examples of divine mercy. Navigator Prime Seth was a serpent creature 20 feet long with scales that changed color based on his emotions. He had guided ships across the galaxy for millions of years until his people challenged the gods. The Coil Masters had been reduced from billions to thousands in a single day. Silent Step through stars was the strangest of all. She looked like smoke given form with eyes like distant stars. Her people the void touched could phase in and out of normal space, but even that had not saved them from the gods' power. Why do they keep us alive? Jake asked Thek as they traveled toward their fate. The old warrior's laugh was bitter. To remind others what happens to those who rebel, but also because they fear us. We are proof that some beings will choose death over slavery. That frightens creatures who see themselves as perfect. During the journey, Lisa discovered something important. The prison transport drew power from a small Nexus core located in the ship's engine room. Unlike the massive cores on the throne worlds, one was barely protected. She began studying its energy patterns and making plans. If I can overload the containment field, it might cause a cascade failure, she told Jake quietly. But it would probably kill everyone on the ship, including us. How big of an explosion? Jake asked. Lisa did the math in her head. Big enough to be seen from the nearest throne world. It would send a message that humans do not go quietly back on Earth. The trial fleet was almost ready. Captain Nicole Hayes would command the mission aboard the fastest ship they had called Defiance. Her crew included the best minds humanity could gather. Dr. Mitchell himself insisted on coming despite the danger. Champion athlete Marcus Webb volunteered to face whatever physical challenges awaited. Dr. Helen Chang agreed to handle any psychic tests, even though her telepathic abilities were weak compared to what they expected to face. The team knew they were probably flying to their deaths, but they went anyway. As the human fleet prepared to launch, Admiral Thompson received another message from deep space. This time it came from the Ascended Ones themselves. High Arbiter Zixthala spoke directly to Earth through technology that made their best radios look like children's toys. People of Earth, your representatives will face 3 trials to prove your species worthy of existence. If they succeed, you will be granted the honor of serving the Divine Order. If they fail, your world will be cleansed and your sun will be moved to a distant corner of space where no one will remember you ever lived. The transmission showed images of the trial grounds, a massive station floating in space where representatives from different species would compete in tests designed by the gods. Other civilizations had faced these trials over the millions of years. All had either failed completely or accepted slavery as the price of survival. We have never encountered a species that refused both options, Zixthala continued, survival or service, death or obedience. These are the only choices the universe offers to lesser beings. Kate looked around the room at her officers and scientists. Do we have any other choice? Dr. Mitchell stood up holding a datapad with his latest calculations. There is a third option. We could try to break the game completely. The Nexus cores are the source of their power. If we could disrupt even one of them, it might change everything. That would mean war against beings who have ruled the galaxy for millions of years, Kate said. Yes, it would, Mitchell agreed. But sometimes war is better than slavery. Sometimes it is better than survival at any cost. Meanwhile, Jake and his fellow prisoners arrived at the trial station. The facility was larger than any city, with areas designed for every type of contest imaginable. Physical arenas where beings fought with strength and speed. Mental chambers where minds battled using pure thought. Technology labs where species proved their mastery of science and engineering. As they were led to their quarters, Jake saw other prisoner groups from different species. All looked defeated and hopeless. Most had been here for centuries, waiting for trials that might never come. The gods enjoyed making lesser beings wait for judgment, but Lisa had finished her work on the ship's Nexus core. The containment field was now rigged to fail on her command. When the time came, she could create an explosion visible across the galaxy. It would not save Earth, but it might inspire others to keep fighting. Are you ready for this? Jake asked his crew as they prepared for whatever came next. Amy looked out the window at the trial station. Ready or not, here we go. Time to show these gods what humans are really made of. Ben checked his equipment. Last time, whatever happens, we go down fighting, Lisa smiled as she touched the detonator hidden in her pocket. And if we go down, we take some of them with us? Captain Nicole Hayes brought the Defiance out of faster-than-light speed near the trial station. The massive structure hung in space like a twisted city made of metal and crystal. Ships from dozens of species floated nearby, all waiting to see If humanity would survive the trials or join the long list of extinct civilizations, Dr. Ryan Mitchell stood beside her on the bridge studying the energy readings from his instruments. The station was powered by 3 medium-sized Nexus cores that pulsed with the compressed essence of dead worlds. He could feel their power even from this distance. "Remember the plan," Nicole told her crew. "We play their game as well as we can, but if things go wrong, we have other options." The human team was transported to the trial chambers along with representatives from 12 other species. Most looked at the humans with pity, knowing they were about to witness another extinction. Only a few seemed curious about these newcomers who had appeared from nowhere. High Arbiter Zixtella materialized in the central chamber along with representatives of the other 4 ruling species. The crystalline shard hive being spoke in mathematical formulas while the plant-like grove mind communicated through chemical sense. The insect hive speaker buzzed with the voice of a trillion minds. The shape-shifting flux eternal simply watched with eyes that changed color. "The trials will test 3 aspects of civilization," Zixtella announced. "Technology mastery to prove you can contribute to galactic advancement. Psychic development to show your mental evolution. Physical and spiritual endurance to demonstrate worthiness of continued existence." The first trial took place in a vast laboratory where each species was given basic materials and asked to build a faster-than-light communication device. The other contestants created elegant solutions using abilities humans could not match. Crystalline beings shaped matter with their thoughts. Energy creatures worked directly with quantum fields. Plant minds grew living computers from seeds. Dr. Mitchell and his team looked at their pile of metal scraps and electronic components. They had no special powers, no millions of years of evolution, just human knowledge and human stubbornness. While other species created beautiful works of art, Mitchell's team built something that looked like it came from a junkyard. "That cannot possibly work," the Shardhide judge declared, looking at the human device. "Only one way to find out," Mitchell replied, connecting the final circuits. The machine hummed to life and immediately began receiving signals from across the galaxy. Not only did it work, it seemed to pick up transmissions the other devices missed. The judges were confused. The human solution was primitive and ugly, but it functioned better than expected. How could such simple technology compete with devices built by advanced species? "Quantum entanglement works the same for everyone," Mitchell explained. "Sometimes the most direct approach is the best approach." The second trial tested psychic abilities. Dr. Helen Chang walked into a chamber designed to challenge mental powers she barely possessed. Other contestants moved objects with their thoughts, spoke across vast distances, and reached into alternate dimensions. Chang could barely sense the thoughts of people standing next to her, but when faced with a maze that required telekinetic navigation, she found a different solution. Instead of moving the barriers, she lay down on the floor and crawled under them. When asked to communicate with a being on another planet, she used the trial station's own communication system. When challenged to see into the future, she simply made educated guesses based on present circumstances. "You are not following the rules," the Grove Mind judge complained. "You did not say I had to follow any specific rules," Chang replied. "You asked me to complete the challenges. I completed them," the judges conferred among themselves. The human had not won the trial, but she had not failed as completely as they expected. Her creative approaches confused beings who thought in rigid patterns established over millions of years. The final trial brought Marcus Webb face to face with opponents who were faster, stronger, and more resilient than any human. He faced a crystal being who could shatter stone with bare hands, a gas creature who could survive in vacuum, a metal creature who felt no pain and never tired. Webb lost every contest of pure strength and speed. He was beaten in races, climbing competitions, and lifting challenges. But when the trial became about endurance, he found his advantage. Human persistence and refusal to quit kept him going when others collapsed from exhaustion. The final challenge was a maze that tested both body and mind. Contestants had to navigate through obstacles while solving puzzles and resisting mental attacks. Webb's opponents used their natural abilities to fly over walls, phase through barriers, or calculate Optimal paths, Webb just kept walking. When he hit a wall, he climbed it. When he reached a puzzle, he worked through it step by step. When psychic attacks tried to confuse him, he ignored them and trusted his instincts. He was slower than everyone else, but he never stopped moving forward. One by one, his opponents gave up or made mistakes that eliminated them. The crystal being became frustrated and shattered itself against a barrier. The gas creature lost cohesion, trying to move too fast. The metal creature's circuits, overloaded from stress. Webb reached the finish line dead last, but still standing. Bloody and exhausted but not defeated, the Ascended Ones gathered to discuss the results. No species had ever performed like this before. The humans had not won any trial outright, but they had not failed completely either. They had found ways to succeed that no one had ever considered. They lacked the abilities necessary for true advancement, the Shard High representative declared. Yet they achieve results despite their limitations, the Flux Eternal observed. Their methods are crude but effective, the Hive speaker buzzed. They think in ways we do not understand, the Grove Mind admitted. High Arbiter Zixthala made the final judgment. Humanity has shown enough promise to earn the right to exist as servants of the divine order. Your world will be spared, but your species will serve us for eternity. This is the mercy we grant to those who prove minimal worthiness, Captain Hayes stepped forward before anyone could respond. We reject your offer. The chamber fell silent. No species had ever refused the mercy of the Ascended Ones. Survival as servants was better than extinction. Everyone knew this was the only logical choice. You would choose death over honor? Zixthala asked in disbelief. We choose freedom, Hayes replied. We would rather die free than live as slaves. The other species representatives stared in shock. These humans were insane. They had been offered life and chose death instead. It made no sense to any rational mind. So be it, Zixthala declared. Your world will be cleansed and your species will be forgotten. You have chosen your fate, but as the Ascended Ones prepared for war, they faced something they had never encountered before. A species that would rather fight impossible odds than accept comfortable slavery. The gods had ruled through fear and power for millions of years. Now they faced beings who were not afraid to die for their beliefs. Dr. Mitchell activated a hidden transmitter sending a message back to Earth. They refused our offer of peace. The war begins now. The war fleets of the Ascended Ones awakened from their million-year slumber like sleeping giants rising from the depths of space. Ancient weapons that had destroyed countless civilizations powered up with energy that made stars look dim. Ships the size of moons emerged from hidden bases throughout the galaxy, all heading toward one small blue world called Earth. High Arbiter Zixthala could not understand what drove these humans to choose death over service. In millions of years, no species had ever refused the mercy of the gods. Fear and survival instinct always won over pride and stubbornness. But humans seemed to operate by different rules entirely. On Earth, Admiral Kate Thompson watched the approaching doom through telescopes that could see across impossible distances. The enemy fleet filled space like a swarm of metal locusts. Each ship carried enough firepower to shatter planets. Earth's 30 vessels looked like toys facing an avalanche, but Dr. Ryan Mitchell had completed his work. Hidden in the cargo holds of every human ship were quantum disruptor missiles designed to tear apart the bonds holding the Nexus cores together. The weapons were untested and based on theories that might be completely wrong. They represented humanity's only hope. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison and his crew were still trapped on the trial station as it prepared for war. Lisa Rodriguez had spent days working on her sabotage plan. The transport ship's small Nexus core was now rigged to overload and explode. It would not damage the station, but it would send a signal across the galaxy. When I trigger this, everyone on the ship dies, Lisa reminded her friends. Are you sure about this? Jake looked at his crew. Amy Walsh nodded grimly. Ben Carter checked his weapon one last time. They had come to the stars to explore and discover. Instead, they had found tyrants who needed to be stopped. Better to die fighting than live as prisoners, Jake said. Do it, Lisa activated the overload sequence. Deep in the ship's engines, the containment field around the Nexus core began to fluctuate. Warning lights flashed throughout the vessel as automated systems tried to correct the problem. But Lisa had made sure the safeties would fail at the critical moment. The explosion tore the transport ship apart in a flash of light that could be seen from the trial station. Chunks of metal and crystal scattered across space, carrying with them something unexpected. For just a moment, voices cried out across the galaxy. The voices of beings who had been trapped inside the core for thousands of years. Warrior Singer Thek heard the voices of his lost people. Navigator Prime Seth felt the presence of the Coil Masters who had died defending their worlds. Silent Step through stars sensed the spirits of the void touched, calling from beyond death. The explosion had not just destroyed a power source. It had freed the compressed essence of extinct civilizations. On the trial station, the remaining Nexus cores flickered as feedback from the explosion traveled through their quantum connections. For a few seconds, the gods felt something they had not experienced in millions of years: fear. How did they do that? The Shard High representative demanded. The core should not have been able to overload, the Grove Mind added. Impossible, buzzed the Hive speaker. The containment fields are perfect, but High Arbiter Zixthala understood what had happened. Human neural patterns. Their thought processes create quantum interference we have never encountered before. They can disrupt our technology in ways we never considered. The realization sent shockwaves through the ruling council. The Nexus cores were supposed to be indestructible. They were the source of all divine power. If humans could damage them, then the gods were not as invincible as they believed. The war fleet accelerated toward Earth with new urgency. The human threat had to be eliminated before they learned to use their strange abilities against the larger cores. But Earth was not waiting passively for destruction. Captain Nicole Hayes led the human fleet out to meet the enemy at the edge of the solar system. The battleship Liberty carried Admiral Thompson herself, along with every weapon humanity could build. Other ships spread out in a defensive formation that looked pitiful against the approaching swarm. Remember what we are fighting for? Kate broadcast to all ships. Not just Earth, but the right of every species to choose their own destiny. The gods have ruled through fear for too long. Today we show the galaxy that tyranny can be defeated. The first contact between fleets lit up space with weapons fire. Human ships were fast and maneuverable, but they were vastly outnumbered. Energy beams that could cut through planets sliced through their hulls. Missiles that could destroy moons turned their vessels into clouds of glowing gas, but the humans fought with desperate creativity. They used kamikaze attacks to take out larger vessels. They hid behind asteroids and struck from ambush. They coordinated their attacks in ways that confused enemies used to fighting primitive civilizations. Captain Hayes led her ship on a suicide run against the flagship of the enemy fleet. The vessel was a crystal mountain in space powered by a massive Nexus core. Her shields collapsed under its firepower, but she kept flying straight toward its heart. "For Earth!" she screamed as her ship rammed into the enemy flagship's hull. The explosion created a brief new star that lit up the solar system. Dr. Mitchell watched from the bridge of his science vessel as the battle raged around him. His quantum disruptor missiles were ready, but he needed to get close enough to target the Nexus cores directly. Most of the enemy ships were too far away and moving too fast. Then he saw his chance. A damaged god ship was drifting nearby, its shields down and its core exposed. Mitchell launched every missile he had at the target. The weapons struck home and began their work, tearing apart quantum bonds that had held for millions of years. The Nexus core cracked like a broken egg, spilling its contents into space. Energy that had been compressed for eons burst free, carrying with it the voices of a billion trapped souls. Across the galaxy, beings who had been declared extinct cried out in joy as their essence was finally liberated. The god ship exploded, taking 3 nearby vessels with it in a chain reaction of destruction. For the first time in galactic history, one of the Ascended Ones had been truly hurt by a lesser species, but the victory came at a terrible cost. Half the human fleet was gone and more ships died every second. Earth's defenses were crumbling under the weight of divine fury. The gods had awakened weapons that could crack planets and boil oceans. As Admiral Thompson watched her fleet die around her, she activated one final weapon. A message broadcast on every frequency that could reach across space. The quantum signature that Dr. Mitchell had discovered. The key to disrupting Nexus cores. If humanity was going to die, they would make sure others could continue the fight. The message spread across the galaxy faster than light, reaching every species that still lived under the boot of divine rule. In hidden bases and secret laboratories, beings who had given up hope suddenly found new purpose. The gods could be hurt. The gods could be defeated. The war had only just begun. The galaxy exploded into revolution as Admiral Thompson's message reached every corner of space. Species that had been slaves for millions of years suddenly understood that the gods could bleed. Hidden weapons emerged from secret vaults. Rebellion fleets appeared from nowhere. The quantum disruption frequency spread like wildfire among beings who had been waiting centuries for hope. Dr. Ryan Mitchell's remaining missiles found their targets among the godships attacking Earth. One by one, the massive Nexus cores cracked and shattered, releasing the compressed essence of countless extinct civilizations. Each explosion lit up space with the voices of beings who had been trapped in quantum prisons for eons. High Arbiter Zixtela felt power draining from his energy form as the cores that sustained him began to fail. For the first time in millions of years, he experienced something the gods thought they had left behind: mortality, the fear of death. The knowledge that he could be defeated. Impossible, he raged as his flagship's core began to destabilize. We are eternal, we are divine. Lesser beings cannot destroy us. But across the galaxy, the impossible was happening. The Serpentine Coil Masters emerged from hiding in distant nebulae, their ships armed with human-designed disruptor weapons. The Ghost, like Void Touched, phased back into normal space carrying tools of destruction. Even the proud Keth Mori broke free from their crystal prisons as the power systems holding them captive collapsed. Warrior Singer Thek stood on the bridge of a liberated godship, watching his people reclaim their freedom. The young humans kept their promise, he growled with satisfaction. They showed us how to break the chains that bind the soul. The war reached its climax above Earth as the last of the human fleet made their final stand. Admiral Kate Thompson's ship, the Liberty, was burning and broken but still fighting. Her crew fired every weapon they had while quantum disruptors tore apart the enemy's power source, the largest Nexus core in the enemy fleet began to crack under the assault. It was one of the original artifacts from the first civilization the gods had destroyed. Inside its quantum matrix lay the compressed essence of an entire species that had ruled the galaxy before the Ascended Ones claimed their thrones. When the core finally shattered, the explosion was visible from 1,000 light years away. The freed spirits of the ancient rulers poured out like a river of starlight, carrying with them knowledge and power that had been lost for geological ages. They had no interest in revenge, only in justice and restoration. High Arbiter Zixtela felt his divine powers collapse as the network of Nexus cores that sustained his species began to fail. Without the stolen life force of extinct civilizations, the Veilter became ordinary energy beings struggling to maintain cohesion. The other god species suffered similar fates as their artificial immortality crumbled. How? Zixtela demanded, as his form began to fade. How did primitive creatures accomplish what advanced civilizations could not? Dr. Mitchell answered from his damaged science vessel. Because we never accepted that it was impossible. Every other species tried to beat you at your own game. We changed the rules entirely. The truth was simpler than the fallen god could understand. Human neural patterns evolved on a world with unique magnetic fields that created quantum resonances no other species possessed. This accident of evolution gave them the ability to disrupt the bonds holding the Nexus cores together. But it was human stubbornness that made them use this gift. As the god fleets retreated or surrendered, the liberated spirits of extinct civilizations began their work of restoration. They did not seek to rule or replace the Ascended Ones. Instead, they offered knowledge and guidance to species ready to reclaim their freedom. The galaxy transformed overnight as worlds that had been enslaved for millions of years suddenly found themselves independent. Trade routes that had been controlled by divine decree opened to all species. Technologies that had been forbidden were shared freely among those ready to use them responsibly. Jake Morrison and his surviving crew were rescued from the wreckage of the trial station by a joint fleet of liberated species. The facility was converted into a memorial for all the civilizations that had been destroyed by divine arrogance. Their names were carved in crystal so future generations would remember the cost of absolute power. Earth became the center of a new galactic alliance based on cooperation rather than domination. Admiral Thompson established the Galactic Liberation Council, bringing together representatives from hundreds of species working as equals. The age of gods was over and the age of freedom had begun. Captain Nicole Hayes survived her ship's destruction and took command of a new vessel called the Phoenix. Her crew included beings from dozens of different species united by their shared commitment to exploration and discovery. Together they ventured into regions of space that had been forbidden for millions of years. Some of the former gods chose exile, fleeing to the dark spaces between galaxies rather than face judgment for their crimes. Others, including a humbled Zixtala, remained to accept responsibility for their actions. Many species were willing to forgive if genuine change was possible. The Veilter, who had once called himself High Arbiter, now worked as a simple energy technician helping to repair worlds damaged by divine rule. "I do not ask for forgiveness," he told the council that judged him. "I only ask for the chance to spend my remaining existence serving rather than ruling." Dr. Ryan Mitchell established research stations throughout the galaxy studying the remains of Nexus core technology. His goal was to ensure such weapons could never again be used to enslave entire civilizations. The quantum disruption frequency became public, knowledge shared with every species as protection against future tyrants. Years passed and the galaxy settled into its new patterns of freedom. Trade flourished between species that had been kept apart by divine decree. Art and science bloomed as beings shared knowledge without fear of punishment. Children grew up knowing they could reach for the stars without asking permission from gods. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Pathfinder, watching a nebula where stars were being born from the dust of a former throne world. Beside him stood beings who had once been enemies and prisoners, now united in the work of exploration and protection. "Captain," called his science officer, a young Kethmori female named Starsinger Kea, "we are receiving a signal from an unexplored sector. It appears to be a distress call." Jake smiled, remembering the day his own exploration had led to the discovery of the god ships. "Set course for the signal," he ordered. "Let us see who needs help today." The Pathfinder turned toward the unknown, carrying a crew dedicated to the principle that had started it all. No being should live in chains. No species should bow to false gods. And no corner of the galaxy should remain unexplored by those brave enough to seek what lies beyond the next star. In the final scene, a young human child on Earth looked up at the night sky and dreamed of adventure. She did not know that her species had already given the greatest gift possible to the cosmos: the courage to break the chains that bind the soul and the wisdom to use freedom responsibly. The age of gods was over. The age of wonder had begun.